Okay. Sorry to cut that short. Just a couple little family matters here before we dive into the scripture tonight. First of all, just some good news. We mentioned it a little bit in the background a couple months ago, and then we haven't said much, but I do want to let you know that as of April 14th, Vernon Alliance Church became the proud owners of the property next door to us here. So we have a new piece of land. So I know some of the questions that you might have revolve around what are the next steps, what's going to be happening. If you take a look when you leave church, if you haven't seen that already, you'll notice that we are working currently on the restoration of the south-facing arbor wall, which we began to notice has gone through some significant deterioration. So we are working at fixing that up. The former owner from whom we bought remains a tenant, and he is preparing to make a shift later on this year, so nothing's changed that way. And we are looking into kind of the legalities of how we might proceed next. One of those being that the land that this building is on is zoned for public use. The land that the arbor and some of our parking lot is zoned commercial, and the land that we just bought is zoned residential. So we're going to have to figure out what we want to be or something like that. There's some investigation that we have to figure out. What do we do with this consolidated property, and how does that affect on what we might do in the future? I just would want to say publicly, we really feel as a board this is an answer to prayer. And as we move into next steps, if we figure out what is going to happen, we'll inform you as quick as we know. And secondly, another little tidbit for those of you who are members. We've started this little habit where each year we do something that's called an annual membership renewal. And it's just part of our bylaws that help us keep in communication with you as elders, between elders and members. You've probably heard stories of someone who's been on the membership roll for 50 years and they actually died 30 years before, but they're still on the membership roll because we just never keep it current. So every year you're going to get a little email that'll just say, hey, do you still want to be a member? And we're not singling you out. Keith, if you get that, we're not saying that we don't want you to be a member or we think that you're a bad member. We just want to know, are we still cool? And all you need to do is click yes, and we're good. That's it. That's all. You don't need to think about it. Unless, of course, you go, well, actually, there are some things that have come up. There are some things I'd like to discuss with leadership. Then you can signal on that little click a form like, I'd like to check in. And that allows us just to maintain current communication with you. So that is going to arrive in your inbox sometime this week. And please don't say, I'll think about it later. Just do it, because then that saves my team from having to phone you. Unless, of course, you do need to think about it, then please do. I'm trying to walk a fine line there. All right. Let's start with a question. Maybe we're shooting high here, but we'll try anyways. It really is just one question that I want to ask, but I'm going to pose it differently because I know that all of us are not exactly in the same boat this morning in our walk with Jesus. And the question really is, why be a Christian? Or if you are one already, why keep being a Christian? Because if you've read the Bible, if you know something about what Jesus asks, if you follow him, you know that he claims the authority to direct your behavior in every sphere of life. He impacts your values, how you use your time. We've already talked today about your money. When you were baptized, if you've been baptized, you likely made a promise to follow Jesus as the Lord, the ruler of your life, which means following his serving example, right? Having an others focus, using your time and your money to help others, using your spiritual gifts to benefit the poor. And then there's that part about loving other Christians, even the weird ones, the ones you don't like, people who had precisely the opposite convictions about COVID as you did. Why? Why continue on with all that? what's your answer to the why question? Because you're supposed to? And if you're not sure, actually, this weekend, if you want to be a Christian, what would be a reason to keep on being one? And I know that some of us find ourselves in this period of our lives reevaluating our Christian faith. And we're asking ourselves, what do I really believe? Is this really worth it? Is the church, is a church community like this one really a group of people that I want to identify with? So why would you say, yeah, I'm going to hang in if you're doubting whether you want to or not? And if you aren't a Christian this weekend, why become one? Is there really a good reason to do so? And what's your reasons, your answers to those questions? Before we got into the Easter season, we were studying the Old Testament story of Ruth. And we're going to conclude our study next weekend, today getting into chapter 4. But it's been a while, and I know that most of it you've completely forgotten, so let's do a little bit of a review. The story starts with an older lady named Naomi, who, due to famine, she and her husband Elimelech leave the little town of Bethlehem, and they leave everything else familiar behind to go into a new country to start, hopefully, a new and better life. And over the next 10 years in that country, Moab, Naomi loses her husband and her 2 sons. They all die, and she's left with nothing, no money, no land, no grandchildren, and very little hope for the future. And she decides to return to Bethlehem pretty much empty-handed, save for a surprisingly feisty daughter-in-law who refuses to leave her side. That lady, Ruth, swears loyalty, lifelong loyalty to Naomi, but to God as well. And as a young widow, she shows amazing courage and heart in most ways, I think, outshining her mother-in-law, who apparently had been following God all her life. And as we hear the beginnings of the story, we begin to wonder, how are these 2 women going to survive? And bigger picture, is there any future for Naomi and Elimelech's family, or is that family line dead and gone? It is then, in Ruth chapter 2, that a third major character entered the picture, a wealthy, older man named Boaz. And we've seen over the past few weeks, or back in March, that his conduct was really characterized by this value of kindness. It's not just that he was a nice person, a kind person. He reflects hesed, loving kindness, a Hebrew word that doesn't really translate easily into English. But hesed was a committed, a sacrificial, a no-demand kind of love that goes out of its way to help others, especially other people who can't seem to help themselves. And Boaz consistently models hesed, being especially aware of those who are weak and defenseless around him, mostly we see to Ruth. And remember that Ruth is really a no one in Bethlehem. She is a Moabite, a foreigner from a people group that Boaz people hated intensely. She is poor, she is a widow, she has no social or legal standing. And yet Boaz, who owes her nothing, gives her the time of day. He is generous. He doesn't just let her take the leftovers from his field. He ensures that she can work elbow to elbow with his own employees. He literally pours grain into her lap. He invites her to have lunch with him every day at his picnic table. And he offers her protection from those who might want to take advantage of her. This is a good man, a man of standing, of character, as chapter 2 tells us. But as the story progresses, we learn that there is something more about Boaz, and this is actually something that we haven't given much attention to, and we're going to do this weekend. Before the end of chapter 2, we learned that Boaz wasn't just a random guy who lived in Bethlehem. He and Naomi are related. Although we're not told exactly how they're connected, they are, we might say, part of the same clan. And as part of Elimelech's clan, Naomi's former husband, Boaz is one of the people in town from the tribe of Judah who could potentially volunteer to function as, a new term here, a kinsman redeemer. Some of your translations might say a guardian redeemer, that he might do those kinds of things or fill that function for Naomi and Ruth. So let's back up for a second, and we're going to, you didn't realize that you were going to get into ancient tribal Hebrew law on your Saturday night or Sunday morning, depending when you're picking this up. With all the social security and government backups that we've got in Canada today, we take for granted programs and supports that are in place for us when we hit hard times. But more than 3,000 years ago, this wasn't the case. And people were even more vulnerable to war, to famine, to drought, to schemes of powerful people who might take advantage of other people. So there needed to be some kind of laws, some kinds of systems in place to help people who might find themselves destitute or dependent and potentially easily overlooked by the rich and the powerful. Enter kinsman redeemers. This is a term which came from Israelite family law, and if you really wanted to do a deep dive, you could check it out, mostly in Leviticus chapter 25. The laws and customs of the time gave near relatives of those kinds of people duties towards their clan members. But you need to note right from the beginning that the duties that they might undertake were completely voluntary. A person had the freedom to choose or to decline the option of redeeming. You weren't forced to take the responsibility if you really didn't want to. So suppose a member of your clan fell upon hard times, like Elimelech and eventually Naomi, his widow, and that in those hard times you sold the rights to your land in order to survive. Well, a kinsman redeemer could redeem or repurchase that property, helping their family member get back on their feet, and also keep land in the hands of people who are local families. And a similar thing could happen if a member of the clan actually sold not just their land, but themselves into slavery. In that case, the kinsman redeemer could voluntarily use their resources to repurchase or redeem an actual person and buy them back out of slavery, regain their freedom, not just their property. You still with me? Okay, let's keep going. Because it gets a little more complicated. It also seemed that in special cases, the legalities surrounding the kinsman redeemer triggered the practice of levirate marriage. Suppose a member of the clan who had sold off their rights to their property, that they, after selling their land, they passed away without a legal heir. Sound familiar? And in addition to the financial challenges surrounding their property and their estate, perhaps that person left behind a widow. And as a woman with few legal rights, this left her extremely vulnerable. No legal heirs to the family line, no way to kind of lay claim on the family estate, because remember, this is a patriarchal society. What is a woman like that to do? Well, the legalities of the levirate marriage could kick in at this point. The law stipulated, the tradition stipulated that a close family member, a male family member, could, again, voluntarily marry the widow of their family member, providing her with Social Security for her family. And if possible, they could try for a child themselves. And what's interesting is that legally speaking, if the widow and her new husband did conceive a son, their son would be considered the legal heir of the dead husband, not the child of his biological father. You still with me? Okay. So if you redeem the property of your dead relative, you had to pay for it with your own money. But when the child from your levirate marriage came of age, that entire estate that you paid for would go to him, not to you or to any of your children. He would just get it. And in this way, you preserved your dead family member's legacy and his property. So, as Ruth starts hanging out in Boaz's field, Naomi has an aha moment. Wait a second. Boaz is not just a pretty face. He is a member of our clan. And as a close relative, he could, if he wanted to, if he was motivated enough, if he was a man full of loving kindness, he could decide to exercise the rights of the Redeemer, and everything we lost in the famine could come back to us. And maybe, just maybe, if he was feeling especially generous, he might also consider becoming a levirate husband to Ruth, and that way he could provide me and Elimelech and Mahlon and Chilion, and Mahlon was Ruth's first husband. He could provide our whole family with an heir. In chapter 3, Ruth and Naomi go all in on that plan. And as we saw, Boaz was a bit of a slow learner romantically. He wasn't picking up on the vibes in the field. So Ruth and Naomi take matters into their own hands. In the middle of the night, on the ground of the threshing floor, Ruth gets on her knees and proposes marriage to Boaz. "Will you be my redeemer?" she says in chapter 3, verse 9. Essentially, she says, "Look, Boaz, I have nothing to offer you. No prestige, no money, no special skills. In fact, given my status as a Moabite, some people are seriously going to doubt your taste in women. I don't even know if I can conceive and give you a child. Not only that, this is going to cost you. To take me means that you would not get just me, you would get my penniless mother-in-law as well. Will you redeem our land? Will you redeem us? Would you be open to the possibility of having a child who would, legally speaking anyways, would be considered the child of Naomi and Elimelech, not your own son? Would you have me?" And he said yes. Amazing. But there was a hitch. He was not first in line to legally exercise the right of redeemer. There was another potential redeemer. Dun, dun, dun. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Let's read it. Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there, just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. So a couple things just about that. The town gate was the place where legal transactions were made. And again, as we've seen in this story, it just so happened that as Boaz got there, the guy showed up at the gates. Who would have thought, right? How did that happen? Actually, when Boaz says, "Come over here, my friend," actually the better translation is, Boaz says, "Hey, come over here, Mr. What's-Your-Face," is the literal translation of what he says. And he calls 10 elders who serve as legal witnesses to whatever real estate or legal transaction is about to happen. We read that in verse 2. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. So watch now how Boaz is going to work this thing out. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line." Boaz is a smooth operator. Naomi has the legal right to buy back her husband's land, but she has no means to buy it back. So she is selling the rights to a willing redeemer in the clan in the hopes that the property will stay in the family. So Boaz asks, "Will you redeem the land?" And the answer is, "Yes, I will redeem it. Mr. What's-his-face thinks, of course I want the land. Why wouldn't I want the land? This is a sweet deal with no downside. For a reasonable investment, I can help the old lady out, and everyone will think that I'm a good guy. And best of all, Naomi has no heirs. She's too old to have kids. So if I redeem it, there is no one in her family that can ever claim it back. I can grow crops on it, I can make money, and eventually it will be an inheritance for my kids. Of course, I'll take it. I can't lose. And when you hear the story for the first time, you're like, what? Is this how this story is going to end? But don't underestimate Boaz. Verse 5. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. Okay, Mr. What's-your-face? Just one more thing before we get the elders involved here. And then this is when the gears start turning in Mr. What's-his-face head as Boaz opens up the new reality of what is going to go down in this transaction. Now, wait a second. Boaz is telling me that not only would I get land, I would now get an extra mother-in-law and an extra wife, which is complicated. First, I'm going to have to take out a loan to buy this farm, and in the short term, I may make some money on it. But if I build it up and then have a kid with Ruth, all this land I'm buying will be his legally. And when he comes of age, he will get legal claim to my entire investment because he will be considered Elimelech's son, and I will get nothing out of it. In the meantime, I'll have to feed him, raise him, and maybe feed and raise other kids that we might have. Nope. Too much downside. Not a whole lot of upside for me. This deal is too costly, too complicated. Boaz, I'm out. She and the land are all yours. And Boaz is like, yes. Everyone, you heard him. He doesn't want to redeem. I'll redeem it. I'll redeem it. Let's sign the papers. I hereby take the land. I hereby take Ruth. We can talk about the price later because I don't even care. Money is no object. You guys as our witnesses. Where's the pen? Let's get the thing done. Is it just me? Or does this Boaz guy remind you of someone else that you know? Someone who is full of hesed. Full of loving kindness, someone with power and means, someone known for depth of character, someone known for their over-the-top generosity towards people who don't deserve it, who are never going to pay it back, someone with a reputation for noticing, even being drawn to those with no social standing. Someone who voluntarily, because of their own disposition and love, someone who redeems people, pays the price so that those redeemed are granted the privileges of family, security, inheritance, a future where the future looked bleak, even when granting all of those privileges would come at great personal cost to them. Do you know someone like that? Come on. Let me jog your memory. 1 Peter 1:18. For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. Ephesians 1:7, in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of wrongdoings according to the riches of his grace. Actually, back up a bit, Ephesians 1:4-5. Even before he made the world, God loved us and chose us in Christ to be holy and without fault in his eyes. God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure. I want you to come back with me about 6 or 7 years ago to when Ellie, my third born, was practicing piano in the living room as I was doing dishes in the kitchen. I would say that she was trying to practice. It wasn't really practicing because she was playing notes on the keyboard, but it wasn't really anything that resembled the sheet music in front of her. And she continued to play the same notes over and over again that were wrong. And I was in the kitchen for the while trying to mind my own business, but I asked if she might pay more attention to what she was doing. And she said that she would, but there were more wrong notes over and over. So I came up with an immediate, admittedly ill-advised solution to the problem. Every time she played a bad note, I said, wrong. Which, of course, as any sane person not caught up in this moment would know, that did not actually help Ellie's playing, but made things much worse. And after a while of me trying the wrongs, she asked to quit. And I, in my infinite wisdom and growing anger, I felt that quitting at that moment wasn't the solution. What she needed was to stay at the piano and concentrate. So I joined her in the living room and escalated the battle against her wrong notes. I took my place immediately behind her. This was a strategic move because she could hear me saying things better, and I could now physically point out the wrong notes that were being played. So there I am, standing over her shoulder, pointing out every flaw. And it's because I heard that Beethoven's dad was really harsh, and look how that turned out for him, right? Of course, me being there exponentially increased the pressure on Ellie because I am like this negative cloud of energy hovering over her. And she began to be more and more worked up, and she started to cry pretty loudly, and the wrong notes began to multiply even further. At that point, she was exasperated and said that I wasn't helping and that she just needed a break, which it was very clear to me that that was insubordination and a complete cop-out. And what the 8-year-old really needed was to stick with it and to cooperate. So I stepped up my game one level higher and said that she would not just play the right notes once. We were not stopping until she played the entire piece through perfectly twice. And so we have this ridiculous scene of a grown man, your lead pastor, putting incredible pressure on a stressed out little girl at the piano because he is absolutely convinced that she is just not concentrating. And of course, it has nothing to do with his issues of control and perfection. Here's what Ruth and 1 Peter and Ephesians 1 say about that and about me. Even before he created the world, God, the very definition of Hesed, saw that episode unfold. And he said to himself, I choose that guy. What a disaster Jason Kaliba will be. He does not bring much to the table. What he brings may actually be less than Ruth the Moabite. But I'm going to redeem him. I will pay for him, not by buying land or by taking out a mortgage, but with the blood of my son. Who will volunteer freely to go to the cross to redeem that stupidity by the piano, and also redeem the thousands of other episodes of stupidity and selfishness and sin that will come as part and parcel of Jason's life? In doing so, God also said, I have decided in advance to bring Jason into my family. By redeeming him, I will also adopt him, granting him all the rights and privileges of my estate and an inheritance that will never perish, spoil, or fade. That's what God decided to do for me in advance of my life, and it gave him great pleasure. Friends, Jesus didn't do that just for me or for Ruth. Scripture says that he did it for us. Every impoverished, ridiculous, sinful, rebellious outsider he has ever chosen. And not because we deserved it somehow, not because he gets lots out of the deal, but simply because he loved us, because he wanted to, and because it pleased him to do so. This is our God. This is who he is. He loves us. To our starting question, which you've likely forgotten about by now, why stick with Christianity? What is the reason you give when you ask yourself, when I ask myself the questions that we ask ourselves from time to time? Why submit to Jesus? Why risk being out of sync with the values of the culture that surrounds us? Why make sacrifices? Why serve when I am tired and busy and it isn't always immediately rewarding? Why stick with this local church? Why hang in when I don't fully like or understand pieces of our doctrine, or when I'm disappointed with different episodes of our history? Why stick with God and his people and pay the price for that? There are many good answers that you might give to that question, but for me, my first answer is this. I stick with him because I can't easily shake the reality that I am like Ruth. I am a person that he chose, that he purchased, that he redeemed at great price. Would you stand to pray with me? Heavenly Father, the things we've considered tonight, although maybe we've come about them in a new way, really it's the core stuff that we believe as Christians, that you love us, that you died on a cross for us, that you've chosen us as your kids. And I just pray that these old, well-known truths that some of us have been like rolling around in our heads for decades, that they would take new life in our hearts today. Thanks for the incredible sacrifice that you made to redeem us. And I pray that day by day, when it's getting tiring, when it's getting old, that you would make our redemption, the cost of it, your incredible love, your loving kindness, would you make that fresh and front of mind so that we can live our lives with joy and actually lean into the difficulty, the hard times, the questions with a fair amount of whimsy, because we go, oh, whatever. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I don't get it. But at root, man, he bought me. Who cares? Holy Spirit, would you make it true for us? I ask this in your name.